My husband and son told me to stop asking questions. Then I found out what they were hiding. I decided to give them what they deserve. I was 72 years old the morning I realized my own family had stopped seeing me as a person. It did not happen all at once. It rarely does. Cruelty works like water dripping on stone, slow enough to pretend it is harmless, steady enough to hollow out whatever it touches. Mine began decades ago, the day I quit my job as a young nurse because Jason told me a proper wife stayed home. I loved him then, or at least I believed I did. He looked me straight in the eye and said a woman who chose a career over her family would one day regret it. I was 24, eager to be loved, desperate to build a peaceful home, so I folded my ambitions neatly and placed them inside a drawer I never opened again. Jake was born the next year. I adored him from the moment I held him, but even then I saw how easily he mirrored his father's tone. When he was 6, he watched me try to fix a broken lamp and said, with a shrug far too practiced for a child, "Mom, you do not know anything. Let Dad handle it." Jason laughed, proud that his son had learned so quickly where authority lived. I told myself it was harmless, a phase, a boy imitating his father. But some seeds, once planted, do not stop growing. Years passed, and whatever Jason called love slowly hardened into control. He handled every bill, every account, every decision about the house. I handled the meals, the laundry, the worries, the quiet. I told myself this was partnership. I told myself silence kept the peace. I told myself stories because the truth was too sharp. They valued my work, but not my voice. I stayed, because where else was I supposed to go? Age did not bring me dignity in that house. It brought fragility. When I was 65, the cancer arrived quietly, like someone tapping at a door I did not want to open. The chemotherapy stole my strength and left my memory scattered like pieces of thread I could not tie together. That was when the tone of the house shifted from dismissive to contemptuous. Jake, then a grown man, said after one doctor visit, "Mom forgets everything. We cannot trust her judgment anymore." He said it in front of the nurse. He said it like he was discussing an appliance that no longer worked. A year later, I slipped on the back steps and fractured my leg. Jason told the neighbors, with a sigh designed to earn sympathy, "She is no use now. Everything is on me." I heard him say it. I stood inside the kitchen doorway and felt something inside me bruise where no one could see. But nothing prepared me for the morning it all crystallized. I had received a strange notification from the retirement account I relied on for medical expenses. An unusual withdrawal. The numbers did not make sense. I walked into the kitchen holding the letter, hoping, foolishly, for clarity. "Jake," I said softly, "did either of you touch my pension account? Something looks wrong." He spun around like I had insulted him. "Mom, for God's sake, stop asking questions. You are old, you are confused, you do not understand anything." His voice was sharp enough to cut, and he made sure it did. He wanted me to bleed. Before I could respond, Jason snapped his newspaper closed and glared at me. "Do not embarrass yourself, Gemma. You are becoming useless." He said it calmly, like it was a fact he had waited years to state out loud. Jake shook his head, smirking. "Old people should stay quiet." My hands trembled. Not because they yelled. I had lived with raised voices all my life. What chilled me was the certainty in their tone. They believed every word. I did not argue. I had learned long ago that in this house, my fear only amused them. About 200 words after that moment, something shifted in me. Not just because of what they said, but because of what I heard later that afternoon. And speaking of moments that shift something deep, let me tell you this, gently and from my heart. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I wish I could tell you I found comfort somewhere that day, but instead I found the truth. I was heading down the hallway with a basket of laundry when I heard voices coming from the garage. The door was half closed, but their whispers escaped through the cracks. Jake said, low and tense, "If she figures this out, we are done." And Jason answered, "She will not. She never has. She never will. My breath caught. I stood completely still, afraid any movement would make the truth disappear before I could hear it fully. Jake hissed. Do you understand how screwed we are if she starts digging? We need to shut her up. I know, Jason said. Just keep her confused. That should not be hard. Then, the line that burrowed into my chest and stayed there. If she finds out, we are dead. I backed away slowly, clutching the laundry basket against my stomach to steady myself. All the years of insults suddenly took on a different shape. They were not just cruel. They were strategy. They needed me to be doubtful, silent, dependent, and most of all, harmless. For the first time in my life, I realized that my silence did not keep the peace. It kept me blind, and they were counting on that. Suspicion does not enter a home like thunder. It slips in quietly, wearing familiar shoes, moving through rooms you thought were safe. After hearing them whisper in the garage, I began watching differently. I stopped taking their words at face value and started noticing the things they hoped I would overlook. It is frightening how many clues appear once you stop trusting the people you love. The first thing I noticed was the mail. I had always been the one to check the mailbox before my fall last year, but after I injured my leg, Jake insisted he would do it. I believed he meant to help. Now, it felt like guarding. Every morning he rushed out before I could even reach the door. If I tried to follow, he would say, "Mom, I already got it. You do not need to worry about bills anymore." I heard dismissal in his tone, but I also heard something sharper, like fear wearing impatience as a disguise. A few times, I managed to glimpse envelopes on the counter before they disappeared. Thick envelopes from the bank, others from the pension office. When I reached for them, Jake would slide them away, too fast, too practiced. I once said, "Let me look at those. They have my name on them." He replied, sounding irritated, "Let Dad handle this. You should be resting." And from the living room, Jason barked, "She said she wants to help." And here we go again. "Sit down, Gemma. Let your men handle adult responsibilities." Their insistence stung, but the urgency in their voices frightened me more. It was the urgency of people afraid of being caught. Then came the late-night phone calls. At first, I thought Jason was talking in his sleep. His voice drifted through the hall at 2 or 3 in the morning, too soft to understand clearly. One night I woke for water and caught the rhythm of a whisper pressed through a closed door. I stepped closer. "I swear to you, she does not know anything," he murmured. His tone was tender in a way he had not used with me in decades. A pause, then a soft laugh. "Yes, I miss you too." My heart felt like it slid to the floor. I leaned on the wall just to stay upright. I knew at once that those words were not meant for me, and the softness in his voice, the softness I spent years begging for, was being given freely to someone else. I did not confront him. Rage requires strength, and I had none left that night. Instead, I walked back to bed and stared at the ceiling until morning, feeling old in a way no birthday had ever made me feel. Once suspicion takes root, every sound becomes a message. I began to pay attention to the garage again. The door was always closed, locked, or blocked, by one of them standing in front of it. I heard papers rustling, drawers being opened and slammed shut, the sharp crack of plastic binders, even the buzz of a drill. It did not sound like repairs. It sounded like men building a lie. One afternoon, I limped quietly down the hallway and tried turning the garage handle. It was locked. "Inside," Jake hissed. "What if she hears?" And Jason snapped, "She cannot figure anything out. Relax." But when I knocked lightly and asked, "What are you two working on?" the door flew open just an inch, enough for Jason's voice to punch through. "Go upstairs, Gemma. Right now." I stepped back, startled. "I only asked." "Do not ask," he growled, and the door slammed shut. After that, I started keeping track of my pension balance the way someone checks a wound, fearfully but unable to stop. Each time I looked, the numbers seemed lighter. Money was disappearing bit by bit, not large enough to trigger alerts, but steady enough to drain me. I brought it up to Jason during breakfast. "Some of my retirement money is missing," I said quietly. He did not even glance at me. "Your memory is failing again. I told you the doctor warned us about this." He said it with such certainty that for a moment I doubted myself, which was exactly what he wanted. Jake chimed in. "Mom, you get confused. It is fine. We will manage your finances. Just stay out of it." That word, confused, became their shield. They used it whenever I approached the truth. They relied on my age, on my illness, on the years they had spent convincing me that I was unreliable. They needed me uncertain. They needed me quiet. The real crack in their story came from something small, almost tender-looking. I found a bracelet in the laundry basket while folding Jason's shirts. It was a child's bracelet, pink, with little plastic beads shaped like hearts. It was far too small for an adult. I picked it up, confused, and when Jason saw it in my hand, he snatched it away so fast the beads clicked together like teeth. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. I said, "It was in your pocket." His face tightened, and he stuffed it into his jeans. "You should not touch my things." But the panic in his eyes spoke louder than anything. Later, when I went to empty the trash, I saw a crumpled paper sticking out, something that looked like a receipt. I smoothed it out and saw a deposit for a rental apartment across town. The name on the document was Jason's, a security deposit. A lease start date just 3 months earlier. It was a place we had never discussed, a place he had never mentioned visiting. My stomach twisted. The bracelet suddenly made sense, but even then, I felt there was something deeper, something I had not yet seen, something hidden not in the trash or the laundry, but somewhere they assumed I would never look. I felt a pulse of cold awareness move through me. Something bigger than infidelity was happening. There was deceit woven into my finances, into my home, into the years of dismissals I had mistaken for frustration rather than calculation. The email loaded slowly, as if my computer understood before I did that whatever waited inside would change everything. When the screen finally brightened, I saw the first image before any text. Jason smiling in a way he had not smiled at me in decades. His arm was wrapped around a woman far younger than I was, her face tilted toward him with an ease that suggested long practice. And between them stood a little girl, maybe 4 or 5, her small hand gripping Jason's pant leg as she looked up at him with trust in her eyes. In the corner of the photo, someone had written in bright marker, "Papa J and us." The letters were round, childish, the kind drawn by a mother guiding a child's fingers. My husband's face, soft with affection, was the face of a man who knew exactly who he wanted to be with. I did not gasp. I did not shout. My throat simply refused to work. I stared at the picture until my vision blurred, not because of tears but because something inside me loosened, as if the world I stood in had quietly detached and begun to drift away. After a long moment, I forced myself to scroll down. The message beneath the photo was short. "Thank you for sending the money. We really needed it this month. Melanie and I appreciate everything. The baby keeps asking when you will visit." There was no shame in the words. No hesitation. Just expectation. Gratitude. Familiarity. It was the kind of message sent between people who shared a life, not a secret. I sat back in my chair. My hands trembled so badly the edges of the laptop blurred, but I did not cry. I had cried enough in this life, and it had never moved either of them. Instead, I felt a stillness settle over me, a kind of quiet that did not come from surrender but from clarity. I remembered too many moments that I had tried to forget. Jason stood over me in the kitchen years ago, slamming his hand on the counter because dinner was late. "What do you even do all day, Gemma?" he had said while Jake watched, smirking. I remembered Jake, 16 and cruel in the casual way teenagers can be when no one teaches them otherwise, shouting, "I am embarrassed. You are my mom." After I reminded him to do his homework, Jason had not corrected him. He laughed. I remembered birthdays where they forgot I existed, doctor visits where they spoke for me, holidays where I was allowed to cook but not to sit at the table until everything was clean. Every memory fits into place now, forming a picture as clear as the one on my screen. They had not simply stopped loving me. They had never respected me at all. But this betrayal was different. It was not just contempt. It was strategy. It was intent. And if Jason could build a new family behind my back, he could also dismantle mine in front of it, quietly, efficiently, legally. I closed the email without deleting it. I wanted evidence, not catharsis. For a long time I sat there, feeling my heartbeat slow into something steady and cold. Rage drains you, resolve fills you. And I was filling, inch by inch. I decided I would not confront them yet. People who lie easily also react violently when cornered. They had the advantage of power. Physical, financial, and emotional. What I had was time, patience, and a lifetime of being underestimated. Let them think I was confused. Confusion is a useful disguise. The next morning, when Jake rushed to check the mailbox, I followed him at a distance. He glanced over his shoulder, startled, and said, "Mom, I said I will handle this." I only nodded and turned away. That tiny nod made him relax, and that relaxation told me I was doing the right thing. Later that afternoon, I visited the bank. My leg hurt as I walked, but I kept going. The young teller, a woman in her 20s with a nervous kindness, looked up and asked if I needed help. I told her I wanted to check my retirement transactions because something did not feel right. She asked for my identification, then frowned slightly at her screen. "There have been several withdrawals recently," she said, "and 2 linked accounts under your name." My breath caught, but I kept my voice steady. "Linked accounts?" I did not open any. She hesitated, her brows knitting together. "Mrs. Thompson, were you aware of transfers to someone named Melanie?" I felt the world tilt, but I forced myself to smile. "No, dear. But I appreciate you telling me." She looked uncomfortable, almost protective. "If you want, I can flag this for suspected identity misuse. It does not have to be a formal complaint yet." I nodded again, fighting the trembling in my hands. "That would be very helpful." As she typed, I realized the seed of suspicion had grown into something undeniable. This was no misunderstanding. This was theft. This was betrayal. This was the deliberate dismantling of the life I had built, brick by brick, by the 2 people I had spent my whole life serving. I walked out of the bank slowly, letting the truth settle into place. My husband was sending my money to another woman. My son was helping him hide it, and they both believed I was too old, too frail, too confused to ever know. They had no idea who I used to be. They had no idea who I still was. And maybe for the first time in decades, I felt something close to strength rising inside me. Not loud strength, not fiery strength, but a quiet, steady force that does not shout, a force that remembers everything. The next day, I returned to the bank, this time with a heaviness in my chest that felt almost physical. The young teller who had helped me before was not there, but another employee called me over. I handed her my identification and asked to review every account associated with my name. She typed quickly, then her face shifted in a way that told me the truth before she spoke it. "Mrs. Thompson, I am seeing multiple active accounts here." I tried to breathe evenly. "I only opened one." "Well, there are 3 under your name. 2 were opened in the past 6 months." I felt something inside me drop, steady and cold. "Show me the activity." She turned the monitor slightly. Even with my aging eyes, I could see the transfers consistent withdrawals, each one small enough to avoid detection, but together they formed a river draining into someone else's hands. 4 loans existed as well, all listed with my signature, all paid out into a single destination account. "Who owns that account?" I asked quietly. The teller hesitated before answering. "A woman named Melanie Carter." My hands began to shake, not from weakness but from the horrifying clarity of it all. He used my name, my credit, my lifetime of savings, and he gave it to her. When the teller stepped away to consult a supervisor, I opened my phone. My fingers trembled as I scrolled to the voice memo app I had begun using ever since suspicion first whispered through my home. I pressed play on a recording I had captured the night before while pretending to sleep. Jake's voice came through first, low and impatient. "Dad, when are we putting her in the nursing home? We cannot keep waiting." Then Jason answered, tone flat and practical. "Soon. Once she is out of the house, everything is ours. Everything is ours. The house, my savings, my life's work." I had spent years believing their cruelty came from frustration, disappointments, and stress. But this was not an emotional failure. This was premeditation. I let the recording play twice. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because I needed to feel the truth fully, without flinching. They were not frustrated with me. They were plotting around me. They were standing in my home, eating the food I cooked, using the heat I paid for, waiting for the moment they could legally erase me. When the teller returned, she said gently, "Mrs. Thompson, we can flag your accounts for potential fraud, but since the documents bear your signature, we might need to investigate more deeply." "My signature?" I asked softly. "Yes," she said. "Each loan has a power of attorney form attached. They appear to authorize your husband and son to act on your behalf." For a moment, I could not speak. Then I said, "I never signed a power of attorney." She swallowed hard, understanding. "The signatures look consistent, but something about them seems off." I knew then exactly how they did it. I had seen Jake in the garage months ago, with papers spread across a workbench, practicing handwriting on sheet after sheet. I thought he was preparing documents for work. I did not realize he was practicing me, my strokes, my loops, the small hesitations in my pen, and Jason must have been standing beside him, teaching him, guiding him, perfecting the theft of my life. The teller apologized, but she did not need to. None of this was her doing. I thanked her politely and walked out of the bank, feeling my legs tremble beneath me. The sun was bright outside, but brightness means nothing when the world you trusted has already collapsed. When I reached the car, I sat there for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel. I did not cry. I felt something different, an ache so deep it felt ancient, like pain that had been waiting years for me to notice it. The money they took was not just savings. It was the cushion I had built in case the cancer returned. It was the safety net Jason once promised I would have for the rest of my life. It was security, stolen and handed to a woman I had never met, and a child who called my husband Papa J. I closed my eyes and let the truth settle in its full weight. They were not waiting for me to get better. They were waiting for me to disappear. When I opened my eyes, the fear was still there, but something else had joined it, a kind of quiet determination I had not felt in years. I had spent my life listening, accommodating, yielding. I was done yielding. Before driving home, I made one more stop, a small legal office near the pharmacy, a place I had passed countless times without noticing. I walked inside and asked to speak with an attorney who handled elder financial abuse. 10 minutes later, a woman named Harper shook my hand with a firmness that told me she did not underestimate me, even if everyone else did. "I need help," I told her, "and I need to fight back." She nodded once. "Then we will begin." And just like that, after years of silence, the war for my own life truly started. The night everything reached its ugliest point began like so many others in that house, with raised voices disguised as conversation. I had barely finished setting down the silverware when Jason walked into the dining room with a stiffness that warned me he had rehearsed whatever he was about to say. He did not sit. He stood at the head of the table, chin lifted, a judge delivering a sentence he believed was righteous. "Gemma," he said coldly, "next week you are moving into a nursing home." My fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto the plate. I felt the sound echo inside me, louder than it should have. "What are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart thrashed against my ribs. Jake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, lips curved into a smirk he did not bother to hide. "Mom, you should be grateful we even let you stay here this long. We have been patient. You need more care than we can give." I stared at them both. "I do not need to move anywhere. I am managing fine." Jake laughed once, sharp and cruel. "Your memory is terrible. You mix up dates, you repeat stories, you ask the same questions again and again. You are not capable of managing your own life anymore." Jason nodded in agreement. "You are not legally competent to make decisions. It is time for professionals to take over. We have already begun the process." A cold ripple moved through my body. "What process?" They exchanged a glance, united in their lie. Jake answered, "We scheduled a psychological evaluation for you next Monday. The doctor will confirm what we already know." I felt the implications as clearly as if they had carved them into the table. If I lost legal competence, they would gain full control over my medical decisions, my finances, my home, my life. And they had already practiced pretending my signature was theirs. They were building a cage, paperwork by paperwork. "You have no right," I whispered. "We have every right," Jason said flatly. "You cannot handle simple responsibilities. We have been carrying you for years." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You will go next week." End of discussion. Something inside me tightened, not in fear, but in a kind of grief that had matured into resolve. They had always treated me as less, but tonight they declared it openly. They were done pretending I mattered. Before I could respond, Jake's phone chimed. He glanced at the screen and rolled his eyes, then answered with exaggerated cheer. "Hey, sweetheart, here he is." He held the phone up so Jason could see. On the screen was a little girl, the same child from the photo, her face glowing under soft apartment lighting. "Papa Jay, when are you coming home?" she asked with innocent certainty, as if she had every right to claim him. Jason's features softened instantly. "Soon, baby. I promise." The contrast between his tenderness toward her and the contempt he showed me was so stark, I felt physically winded. Jake grinned as if it amused him to watch me realize the truth in real time. When Jason ended the call, neither of them acknowledged the cruelty of what I had just witnessed. To them, my hurt was irrelevant. Their lives, their secrets, their plans were all that mattered. I sat perfectly still, letting the humiliation burn through me until it settled into something steadier. They thought they were announcing the end of my life. Instead, they were confirming exactly why I had to fight. At that moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I excused myself from the table and stepped into the hallway before answering. It was Harper. "Mrs. Thompson," she said gently, "I wanted to let you know the living trust has been finalized. Everything you own is now protected. No one can touch your assets without your consent." I closed my eyes. Relief washed through me, not the soft kind, but the anchored kind, the kind that steadies your feet when the earth underneath is shifting. "Thank you," I whispered. "Truly." "Do not thank me yet," she replied. "We still have work to do. But you are safe now, legally safe." I hung up and stood there for a long moment, listening to the muffled voices of the men who believed they had already claimed my future. They thought I was powerless. They thought the papers they forged and the lies they rehearsed had sealed my fate. But they had underestimated the one thing that would matter most. I had woken up, and now I knew exactly what I was fighting for. The morning they planned to take me to the nursing home began with a silence that felt artificial, as if the house were holding its breath. Jason and Jake had spent the past week circling me like vultures, waiting for a body to stop twitching. They thought I was compliant. They thought fear had swallowed my voice. They thought everything was already settled. I sat by the window in my coat, hands folded neatly on my lap, waiting not for them, but for the truth to arrive. At exactly 9 o'clock, their footsteps echoed down the hall. Jake appeared first, holding a clipboard, of all things, like he was checking me off a list of tasks. He looked almost proud of himself. "Mom, the facility will evaluate you today and probably keep you for observation," he said. "It is better this way." Jason stood behind him with the car keys. "Let us get this over with." I did not stand. Instead, I looked at the two men who had spent years calling themselves my protectors, men who thought I would walk willingly into confinement, men who had forgotten I was still capable of listening, noticing, preparing, men who assumed that age meant surrender. Before I could speak, a sharp knock sounded at the front door. They both stiffened. Another knock. Firm, authoritative. Jake frowned. "Are we expecting someone?" I said nothing. They walked toward the door with the cautious irritation of people whose plans were being disrupted. When Jake pulled it open, the air in the room shifted. Two officers stood on the porch, flanked by a woman in a charcoal suit carrying a briefcase. One of the officers stepped forward. "We are looking for Jason Thompson and Jake Thompson." Jason blinked rapidly, struggling to regain his composure. "What is this about?" The officer's voice was steady, unmovable. "You are being taken into custody for financial fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and falsification of legal documents." For a moment, silence filled the doorway like a tidal wave. "What?" Jake stammered. No, this has to be a mistake, the officer continued, unfazed. You forged power of attorney forms, opened multiple accounts under Mrs. Gemma Thompson's name, redirected her mail, and used her retirement funds without authorization. You also attempted to transfer property by declaring her mentally incompetent. You will both be questioned further downtown. I watched the color drain from Jake's face. He stepped backward, bumping into the wall. Dad, what is happening? Jason snapped. Shut up, Jake. Let me handle this. The officer cut in. Put your hands where we can see them. Jake's breathing quickened. Wait, my father did this. I only did what he told me to do. Jason twisted toward him. Do not you dare pin this on me. Jake stole the money. The officers exchanged a look. They had seen this before, family loyalty dissolving in seconds when consequences arrived. Jake raised his voice. He said Mom would not be around much longer. He told me we could sell the house. This was all his plan. And he is a grown man who could have said no. Jason retorted. This is your fault. They were unraveling, and I felt no pity, only clarity. I rose slowly from my chair and walked toward them. Jason saw me in his peripheral vision and glared. Stay out of this, Gemma. But I stepped forward anyway, standing at the threshold between them and the officers. You told me not to ask questions, I said softly. Their arguing stopped. My voice stayed steady, calm in a way that seemed to unnerve them more than yelling ever could. You told me I was confused. You told me I imagined things. You told me to stay quiet. I looked at the officers, then back at the men who had built their plans on the assumption that I was powerless. Well, I said, today I am not asking anything. I held their gaze. Today the law answers for me. For a moment, not even the officers moved. It was as if the house itself leaned closer to listen. Then the officer turned to Jason. Sir, put your hands behind your back. The click of the handcuffs felt like punctuation at the end of a sentence he had written himself. Jake took a step toward me, eyes wide with terror. Mom, please tell them we can fix this. Tell them you did not mean to accuse us. I looked at him the way a mother looks at a grown child she no longer recognizes. You made your choices, I said, and you made them believing I would never make one of my own. His face crumpled. Another officer exited the house to retrieve documents. Ma'am, he told me, your accounts have already been secured. The fraudulent ones are frozen. No one but you will have access going forward. I nodded, grateful but too numb to smile. The woman in the suit stepped toward me. Mrs. Thompson, we wanted to inform you that the secondary residence, the apartment leased under your husband's name, has been sealed as part of the investigation. Any further financial activity involving that account holder will be reviewed. I knew what that meant. Melanie, upon hearing her source of money was under criminal scrutiny, had vanished. She had no intention of defending Jason. Love built on stolen money evaporates the moment the money stops. When Jason heard the apartment mentioned, his knees went weak. Please, he muttered. This is not necessary. I can explain. But explanations without truth are nothing. And truth was something he had abandoned years ago. As they led him toward the patrol car, he stumbled. Jake shouted at the officers, then at me, then at the sky, desperate for someone to save him from the consequences he had helped create. No one did. I stood in the doorway as they were taken away. The house felt strangely quiet, not empty, just finally honest. For years it had echoed with lies spoken as casually as breathing. Now, for the first time, it echoed with justice. And I felt something I had not felt in decades. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on silence. The real kind, the kind that comes when the truth finally stands where fear once lived. The weeks after their arrest passed, in a blur of court dates, statements, and paperwork. But through it all, I felt a strange steadiness, as if something deep inside me had finally anchored itself after drifting for years. Harper handled most of the legal conversations, explaining the charges in a calm tone that contrasted sharply with the chaos Jason and Jake had created. The outcome came faster than I expected. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, forged documents, voice recordings, witness accounts, and months of transfers to Melanie's apartment. There was no room for denial, no cracks for excuses to slip through. Jason stood in court with his shoulders slumped, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. When the judge announced a sentence of 6 to 8 years for financial fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and coercion, he closed his eyes as if the weight of every decision he had made finally settled on him. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel sorrow. What I felt was completion, like watching the final piece of a puzzle fall into place after too many years of pretending the picture looked different than it did. Jake's case was quieter. He blamed his father, his debt, his desperation. The court saw enough distinction between his role and Jason's to offer leniency, but not forgiveness. He received 2 to 3 years of probation, mandatory financial restitution, and community service. He walked out of the courtroom with a sentence far lighter than the one he had planned for me, yet his face looked haunted, like a boy who finally realized he was not the victim he had pretended to be. Melanie disappeared from the narrative almost immediately. Once Jason's support vanished, so did her affection. She blocked his calls, his emails, and any attempt he made to reach out from the detention center. She left him alone to face the scandal, the investigation, and the ruin of his reputation. I heard from the prosecutor that she had relocated, likely fearing involvement in the case. Whatever excuses she had once whispered into Jason's ear evaporated the moment the money stopped. He had traded his marriage, his dignity, and his freedom for a fantasy that could not survive daylight. The community reacted swiftly. People who once greeted Jason with friendly small talk now crossed the street when his name came up. Neighbors whispered about the arrest, the forged signatures, the nursing home plan. Some came to me with shocked apologies, saying they had no idea what had been happening inside my house. I accepted their sympathy politely, though I wondered how much they had really noticed all those years, the bruises of humiliation, the tightening of my silence, the way I walked as though trying not to disturb anyone. The house itself became quieter after the sentencing. I stayed in the guest room for a few days while preparing to leave for my new home. But the emptiness felt different this time. Not frightening, not lonely, just clean. The lies that had cluttered every corner were gone. One afternoon, as I was packing the last of my belongings, Jake appeared at the door. He looked older than his 42 years, as if shame had aged him faster than time. He did not step inside. He simply stood on the porch, hands shaking, eyes red. "Mom," he said softly, "I am sorry." The words hung in the air like a fragile offering. I studied his face, this man I had raised, defended, loved with every part of me that knew how to love. I saw the boy he used to be, the one who reached for my hand when he was scared of thunderstorms. But I also saw the man who stood beside his father while they drained my accounts. The man who told me I should be grateful they let me stay in my own home. The man who called me confused, incompetent, burdensome. "I appreciate your apology," I said quietly, "but some things cannot be undone." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I know." I wished, for a brief moment, that I could take his pain away. But pain is sometimes the only teacher left when the lesson has been ignored too long. He whispered goodbye and walked down the steps, shoulders shaking, leaving me with a hollow sadness that did not erase the truth. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and survival is not the same as reconciliation. As the door closed behind him, I felt the chapter finally end, not with anger, but with acceptance. What they had done shaped their fate. What I had endured shaped mine. I moved into the little lake house on a warm morning in late spring. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the water outside the porch shivered with light whenever the wind passed over it. The house itself was modest, 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a porch just wide enough for a rocking chair, but it felt larger than anything I had ever lived in. Maybe because, for the first time in my life, every inch of it belonged to me and me alone. I unpacked slowly, savoring the simplicity of placing my things where I wanted them, not where someone else insisted they should go. I hung my mother's old quilt over the back of the sofa. I lined the kitchen shelves with the chipped blue bowls I had carried through every home since my 20s. I opened the windows and let fresh air sweep through the rooms, chasing out the last bits of fear that still clung to me like dust. Outside, I planted marigolds along the walkway. Their bright yellow heads stood stubbornly against the soil, refusing to wilt, refusing to bend. I liked them for that. I also planted lavender by the porch, believing, maybe foolishly, that its calmness might sink into me if I watered it each morning. Every day, I learned something small about living alone. How quiet tastes when it is chosen, not forced. How free a day feels when no one is waiting to find fault in it. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch watching the lake ripple under the breeze, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Harper. "All documents are finalized," she wrote. "Everything is protected. No one can touch anything that belongs to you ever again." I stared at the words for a long moment. Relief washed through me, not sudden or loud, but warm and grounding, like stepping into a room where the storm outside can no longer reach. I typed a simple response, "Thank you," and set the phone aside. For the first time in many years, I closed my eyes without bracing myself for someone's voice. No footsteps, no shouting, no accusations waiting around the corner, just the soft promise of a life that I had fought for with every quiet part of me. I rocked gently in my chair, listening to the steady rhythm of water against the shore. And in that stillness, a truth rose inside me, clear, undeniable, and finally mine. My whole life, they told me silence made me weak. They said I did not know anything. They said I should stay in the background, grateful for whatever space they allowed. But the truth is simpler, sharper, and far more powerful. Silence was never my weakness. It was where I learned to see clearly. It was the place where I gathered strength they never imagined I possessed. And when the moment came, that silence turned into the loudest justice they had ever heard. All my life, they told me to be quiet because they believed I was powerless. But the truth I hold now like a key in my palm, is this. They mistook quiet for defeat. But quiet was when I was strongest. Thank you, my dear ones, for sitting with me through this long, winding road of truth. Stories like mine are not easy to tell, and they are not easy to hear, but they matter. They remind us that strength does not always shout, and justice does not always arrive wearing armor. Sometimes it walks in softly, the way a sunrise does, bringing light to corners we thought would stay dark forever. If my story reached you, if it stirred something in your heart, or helped you feel seen, or simply reminded you that silence does not mean surrender, then I hope you will stay close. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories so you and I can keep walking together through these memories, some painful, some healing, all of them true. Your support helps these stories find the ears that need them most. Thank you for listening, my dear ones. Until the next story, be gentle with yourselves, and even gentler with your strength.